My best friend tried manipulating me into believing that my boyfriend cheated on me with her. When I found out the disgusting truth, I cut her off, and she went mentally insane and started trying to ruin my life. My best friend Becca called me drunk last Saturday asking for a ride home. I couldn't pick her up and instead asked my boyfriend Nate to get her. A couple of days later, he started being weird with his phone. He started putting it face down and even changed his password. Well, yesterday I saw Becca and told her about it. She suddenly started bawling. She said they hooked up in his car the night that he came to pick her up. I asked her to show me the texts, but they were all in the app Signal, which deletes messages after a day. When I got home, I confronted Nate, and he denied it. He did admit they were talking on Signal, but he said that he was actually just asking her about engagement rings for me. That's when Becca texted him asking if he remembers what they did the other night. Well, he instantly replied asking her what she was on about, and she told him to stop playing dumb. Nate then called her pretending I wasn't in the room and told her to stop whatever she was doing, but she just kept telling Nate to stop lying until he got angry and hung up on her. I still don't know what to think. Update 1. I told Nate that I had found out a way to recover deleted messages from Signal. He immediately took out his phone and opened the app and asked me to show him how to do it, so I already thought that must mean he was telling me the truth because he didn't panic or hesitate at all, which was good because when I tried to download Signal on my old phone, it turned out that it's too old to support the current version of the app, so it wouldn't work. Nate then asked me if we were going to have to go out and buy a new phone for me to believe that he was telling me the truth, and he said that he was willing to do it if that's what it would take. I told Nate it wasn't that I didn't believe him, I just wanted to have some proof because I just couldn't understand why Becca would lie about it. Nate said that she would lie about it because she's a crazy drunk beach, and there's literally no way for a non-crazy person to understand why she would do anything, and once the messages prove that he didn't ever want me talking to her again, then he said to get up because if we were going to go to the Verizon store, we had to get there before it closed. By then, I completely believed Nate anyway, so I told him we didn't have to go anywhere or get a new phone and that I believed him, and I knew he didn't cheat on me and that he would never do that. Nate said that he would hope I know that and that he didn't understand why I didn't take his word for it in the first place. I started trying to explain why I didn't want to just immediately dismiss what Becca had said happened, but Nate said that he really couldn't listen to that right now. I said that was fair and agreed that I would cut Becca off, but that first I wanted to try to get her to admit that nothing happened. Nate said fine, but to call her with my phone on speaker, because he thought he also deserved to hear her admit that she was lying. So I called Becca, and I said the same thing to her that I said to Nate, that I figured out how to recover deleted messages on Signal. She asked me why I would need to do that, so that was when I knew for sure that she was definitely making it up and not just confused somehow. I said it was because I wanted to have proof of what she and Nate talked about. Becca asked me if I saw their messages, so I lied and said yes. After that, Becca just went silent until finally I asked her if she was going to say anything. Then she asked me if that meant that we were engaged now. So then I really just lost it on her and screamed at her asking her if she was serious and what the F was wrong with her, and how could that possibly be all that she had to say? Becca started screaming back, telling me to calm down, and about how obviously I never believed her anyway, because it's not like we broke up over it. I was crying by that point, and because of that, I couldn't really say anything else. So then Nate told Becca to go F herself and to never ever contact either one of us ever again, and hung up on her. A minute later, Becca sent me a completely unhinged text that I'm quoting here verbatim, apart from changed names. Courtney, you are supposed to be my friend for life. You are supposed to be there for me. You are supposed to be my person. But then you meet Nate, and now you only care about Nate. Everything is about Nate. Tell me why Nate comes to pick me up when I call you. I called you, not your precious effing Nate. I only want you to see how effed up this is, but do you? No. Of course you don't. Of course you choose Nate over me like you always do and like you always will. You pretend to care about me, but I can see you don't care. It is pathetic, Courtney. You are a pathetic woman who would choose a man over a friend. But since you can't say it yourself, I will. Since you have to have your sweet, perfect little baby Nate do it for you, I will. Goodbye, Courtney. Is that what you want? Goodbye forever. I hope you got what you want. There were the 3 dots after that showing she was still typing more, but I blocked her before she sent it. I don't care about anything else that she has to say. I'm sure it's all just going to be more bullshit about why this is my fault, or justifications about why what she did wasn't that bad, and I should forgive her. I know Nate is probably right, and there's no non-crazy logic behind why Becca would stoop to doing something like this, but obviously I've still been thinking about it, and my best guess is that whoever said that Becca still blames me and Nate, apparently mostly Nate, for her being a drunk mess who can't get her life together is right. It seems like she somehow thought that if she said she hooked up with Nate, I'd break up with him but still want to be friends with her, and then everything would magically be fixed. As far as stuff with Nate, I asked him if he thought he could ever forgive me for doubting him, and he said that since I came to my senses and I cut Becca off, he guesses we can try to put it behind us. I don't think he's still going to propose anytime soon. After this, I probably wouldn't if I was him. And from what Nate said, he didn't actually do any planning yet other than asking Becca about rings, and if I'd think a public proposal proposal was tacky or not, all he was doing so far was trying to get ideas without me knowing he was talking to her about it. So just based on that, I think probably it's not going to happen for a while if it still does at all. Update 2. It turned out that what was happening with Becca was far more severe than I initially realized. What started with her making false accusations about Nate quickly escalated into something much worse. After I blocked her, she didn't just let things go. Instead, she created numerous fake accounts and began bombarding me with an endless stream of messages. These weren't just a few angry texts. They were constant, dozens of messages each day. Her messages were filled with a mix of rage and bizarre threats. She claimed I had ruined her life and swore she would get revenge on both me and Nate. The harassment continued for months, with her relentless onslaught of messages feeling like an unending nightmare. During this period, I started hearing from mutual friends that Becca was not only targeting me through messages, but was also active on social media. She posted rants on Facebook multiple times a day. Her posts were a jumble of incoherent thoughts and angry outbursts, detailing how much she hated me and portraying me as the villain who had destroyed her life. It was disturbing to watch her spiral so publicly. Each post was more frantic than the last, painting a picture of someone completely losing touch with reality. I was terrified. I went to the police twice, trying to explain the severity of the situation and asking for a restraining order. I was genuinely scared that Becca might show up at our apartment and do something violent. I even went so far as to install a front door camera, hoping it would provide evidence if anything happened. The police, however, didn't take my concerns seriously. They told me that Becca wasn't directly threatening violence, and that her online rants didn't qualify as a legal issue. They acted like I was overreacting. They advised me to keep blocking her accounts and assured me that she'd eventually lose interest and move on. It felt like they were dismissing my fears and not understanding the gravity of the situation. Things took a turn for the worse when Nate's car was vandalized while he was at work. The windshield was smashed, and while several cars in the area were targeted, I was convinced it was Becca. I went back to the police, more desperate than ever. They sent an officer to talk to Becca, but she denied any involvement. Again, I had no concrete proof that she was responsible. The officer left, and once again, nothing was done. The incident was chalked up as random vandalism, and Becca remained free to continue her harassment. After that, the situation deteriorated further. Becca's behavior became increasingly erratic. It turned out that her living conditions were deplorable. Her apartment was filthy, and she was drinking heavily. She was a danger to herself, and the news was deeply troubling. Eventually, after a visit from the police and seeing the state she was in, they decided she needed help. Becca was admitted to a psych ward for a week. I didn't know the specifics of her diagnosis or if she was on medication, but I was relieved to hear she was finally receiving some form of treatment. While Becca was in the psych ward, I hoped that things would calm down. I tried to focus on rebuilding some semblance of normalcy in my life, but after her release, I didn't hear from her. I kept a close eye on her social media, watching to make sure she wasn't posting about me or making threats. It was unsettling to think that she might still be out there, but at least she had moved to a different state to live with her dad. I hoped that being in a new environment might help her recover, and that she'd be less inclined to continue her campaign against me. In the meantime, Nate and I had been trying to cope with the fallout from everything that had happened. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts, things between us only seemed to worsen. The stress and constant harassment from Becca were taking a significant toll on him. Nate was struggling to manage the emotional and psychological strain of the situation. Every time we talked, it seemed like the weight of Becca's actions and the ongoing drama was creating a chasm between us that we couldn't bridge. He felt overwhelmed and unable to handle the pressure any longer. The tipping point came after the windshield incident. Nate finally reached his breaking point and decided to end our relationship. The breakup was incredibly painful for me. Nate's anger and frustration were palpable, and it was clear that he had lost faith in the possibility of us moving past the turmoil. His inability to forgive me for initially doubting him added another layer of hurt. It felt like a double blow, losing both the person I loved and the hope of mending our relationship. I tried repeatedly to talk to Nate about fixing things once Becca was out of the picture. I assured him that I wanted to rebuild our relationship and move forward, but he remained resolute. The emotional damage caused by the whole ordeal seemed too severe for him to overcome. Every attempt I made to reach out and discuss our future only seemed to reinforce his decision. It was as though the strain and distrust had cemented itself so deeply that there was no way to undo the damage. The sense of finality in Nate's decision left me feeling utterly defeated, and it became clear that there was no going back to what we once had. As time went on, I struggled to come to terms with everything that had happened. Becca's actions were more extreme than I ever anticipated. The experience of dealing with her harassment, trying to get the police to take me seriously, and navigating the fallout with Nate took a significant emotional emotional toll. I had to focus on healing and finding a way to move forward, even though the whole ordeal had left me shaken. I started trying to rebuild my life, focusing on self-care and reconnecting with friends who had been supportive throughout the chaos. I also sought therapy to help process the trauma and learn how to cope with the aftermath of the situation. It was a long and difficult road, but I knew I had to work through it to find some peace. Despite the challenges, I eventually found a way to regain a sense of normalcy. The experience had been a harsh lesson in trust, resilience, and the importance of seeking help when needed. I was determined to move on, learn from what had happened, and build a healthier future for myself.